Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered Parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy the
interview.
Today we have Tom McIntosh. Thank you for coming on the podcast today. Could you tell us a bit about yourself? Just let the audience know a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Tom. I'm in the upper house of the Victorian State Parliament. I represent Eastern Victoria region, which is all the way from Mount Eliza, Mornington, up to Lilydale, all the way out to Mallacoota, so the east part of the state. So I've got lots of issues that come up in that area that are agricultural, energy, got lots of the suburban population, so infrastructure, education, health, all manner of items come up.
Yeah. Should we start with our first
We
question?
can get straight into the questions. So,
How was your high school and university life, and do you have any memorable moments?
Yeah, so high school life good. I didn't have a university life. I went to TAFE, so which I'm very proud of. I think TAFE's a great way for a whole lot of people to get paid to learn, get in and learn skills. So I absolutely think we need. I think I mentioned this in my first speech. We need people going to university. We need. Yeah, okay, stop that.
Pause it. So you're talking about taste?
Yeah, so as I said, look, high school was good. I didn't attend university. I went to TAFE. I think TAFE's great to learn on the job, get trained up, get skills, be active in the workforce. But as I said in my first speech, I think university is really important for a lot of our workers in our economy as well. So I think it's about doing both. I think it's about giving equal respect to both university and TAFE. Different people getting trained in different things and fulfilling different things we need in our economy.
yeah, because in a sense, you can't just have a whole economy just full of professionals and certain white collar workers in certain industries. You need electricians, you need plumbers, you need tradies, and that sort of thing to build homes for people coming in the next 20-30 years. So you can't just have an economy just full of professionals accountants, lawyers, that sort of thing. So it's really important that people diversify, and not everyone follows the same career path. And people are different, so some people have different interests and different personalities, and some people want to become a tradie, some people want to do accounting, some people want to join politics. So everyone's different in their own way. And I think in general, it's really important that in a sense, we don't always prioritize and force people to do certain things because everyone's different.
Yeah, and I think there's two parts of it. One's like communities, personal interests, and all that sort of thing. You want people to live rich lives doing what they want to do, where they're happy. And sometimes that's changing. I've actually met lots of people who've been white collar and then gone back and trained and gone into apprenticeship because they just want to be out, out and amongst, whether that's a trade or something else. Going into health sector or various other places because they just want to do something different, whether not in front of a computer. Or alternatively, you've got people going the other way, do their time, on the floor of a hospital or as a trade or various other things, and then, transitioning, particularly later in life as the body can't hold up to do the work, being more in, whether it's in management or some other more sort of role that's less hands-on or less difficult on the body. But the other thing I was just briefly going to say as well, I think, acknowledging that so our community and personal needs, but also the economic needs of our society, and we're undergoing a massive transition in our energy systems. And for example, we're going to need another, on top of the say 150,000 electricians that are already around Australia, we're going to need another 30,000 electricians on top of that minimum, because whether it's the big projects with offshore wind, solar, onshore wind, whatnot, we've also got electrification at home. So I think the beauty of having a really good training and skills system, and so in Victoria, the investment and the emphasis we've put on TAFE in the last 20 years, that Minister Tierney has, particularly over the best part of the last decade, has kept a focus on that. That gives you the ability and the manoeuvrability to be able to train people in the skills that are necessary for the era that they are in, and to retrain as necessary too, as technological advancement just continues to come quicker and quicker for us to be able to respond to that need.
Yeah, for sure. And as you said, with our state, moving towards electrification, especially with the removal of gas stoves and that sort of thing, it's really important, as you said, that we have more electricians in the industry. And I think in general, there is still a little bit of a stigma towards people doing a trade, and I think that sort of stigma needs to hopefully end as soon as possible, because people have, as I said before, people have different interests, and you don't necessarily have to, have a lower IQ if you do a trade. There's a lot of smart people who become electricians and become traders and that sort of thing. And I think that sort of stigma is still there. And hopefully, in the next couple of years it goes down and dies down a bit. But I think in general, tradies are very underappreciated in society about how hard they work, because this whole building around us was built by tradies. The door that enters this office, Tom's desk over there is built by a tradie. So they're really, really important people in our society.
And I think the strength of Victoria is diversity of skills, diversity of people, diversity of background, but also respect. So it's whether you've got someone who's in traditional blue collar, the way they look to white collar, and vice versa. It's about respect of the different skills we bring, and through that diversity of skills, lived experience, training, whatever it might be, education, that we're all stronger for it.
Yeah, and we'll now move on to our next question. So this does link a lot towards, your personal life as an electrician before entering Parliament. So, Tom, before you entered Parliament, you worked as an electrician. How was the transition from being a tradie, so being an electrician, to becoming a member of Parliament?
Yeah, so the transition, I suppose, was gradual. I worked on tools for about 10 years. I worked construction, a lot around Victoria and Australia. It gave me the ability to do a lot of things in life, a lot of various experience, which I think assist me in this role. So I think the transition was a good one. I always had a yearning, maybe not a yearning, but I always had a strong political sense, a strong sense of fairness, social justice. So I automatically joined the union as soon as I began working, because I think fair pay, safe conditions are really important. Various things, we touched on climate change, access to housing, access to services, all this sort of stuff. A fundamental belief that you want everybody to try and get an equal outcome, and therefore, enabling the equitable starting point for people in life. So I think that drive was always there. It's just, I think people can take different walks to get into Parliament, but if you've got that sort of yearning or desire for outcomes for society, whatever it is that builds those, and for hopefully most of those that are on my side of Parliament, it's that value set around an equal society is, I think that's there and underpinning, and you probably come into Parliament at a very young age or an older age. I think it's that sort of underpinning of values which then enables you to go out and prosecute or argue for or develop plans to achieve those things.
Yeah, and I think in general, your different perspective coming from a tradie background is, I guess, a bit refreshing in sort of Parliament, because as we said before, Parliament is full of a lot of lawyers and professionals, and in a sense, being a tradie, you do have a bit different perspective, and you're able to connect with a different sort of group in our community that are able to understand where you came from, and you're able to understand in general their issues a lot more better than say someone who came from a law degree.
Yeah, and I think, look, as I said before about respect and diversity in our community, it's the same in here, and I think we need a diversity of MPs. So we've gone a long way on gender diversity. We've still got to go a long way on the diversity of background, cultural background and whatnot. So I think that's something we've got to make. But I think that being mindful diversity of level of education and employment backgrounds, it's one that we can't, potentially we'll never sort of set particular really tight goals or quotas around, but it's one that if we can be mindful, it's great for a diverse party. A diverse Parliament has the best ability to reflect, represent, communicate with our voters and people. So
yeah. We'll now move on to our third question. So, You also worked in politics for Jane Garrett and Jed Kearney as an
Yep.
electric officer and an advisor.
Yep.
What things did you learn from Jane and Jed specifically that you've used in your own political career?
Yeah, so when Jane asked me to be an advisor for her, a ministerial advisor, I was sort of my first entry into working for the party. So I think in that ministerial role, that was consumer affairs, there was a lot of acts. It's not the biggest portfolio in Parliament, but it's a very diverse one. There's 20, 25 different acts of all sorts of things that touch people's lives. So I think the biggest takeaway for me from that was, engaging with people. So it doesn't matter whether you've got good news, bad news, indifferent. Stakeholder engagement is really, really important. So if you've got an issue that affects certain groups of the community, or you've got representative groups reflecting the community on, regulation, legislation that needs amendment or change, leaning in, listening, talking both ways, and then when you land on a decision, making sure everyone understands what your position is and why you've come to that position. So if people don't always have to love every decision you make, but they need to understand how you've got there and what your thinking is and what it is that
Those
you're going to
communication skills are very, very important.
Yeah. And as far as working for Jed, really that was a bit of a different role, in the local electorate office. That was really one of community, community, engage, talk, discuss. Probably a bit less at the policy level, but more talking about the things that were really, really valued by that community, which, climate change, conversation around migration, refugees, like the way we're basically treating people and the respect we hold for people in our conversations.
Yeah, and I think in general, especially Jed's electorate of Cooper, isn't it? In federal parliament, it's an inner city electorate, but there's a lot of diverse backgrounds there. So
Absolutely.
and I guess, in a sense, it's a bit different to the electorate that you represent currently now in Eastern Victoria. A little bit, there's still some people with diverse backgrounds there, but I think would you say it was a very good experience for you just to be, in amongst the community then, and it helped you in a sense?
Absolutely. So the links are big First Nations populations in both. Outside of that though, different parts of Cooper, big, Italian, Greek, like lots of different populations there that have migrated in the last couple of generations. So you get a good mix of issues and ideas and thoughts and whatnot.
And then in Eastern Victoria, a lot of it would mainly be, especially, in the further Gippsland areas, a lot of farming areas and that But close to the city, Clyde and that sort of area, Pakenham, there's a lot of migrant, first gen, second gen.
And the areas I focus on being an upper house MP is to represent the communities that don't have a Labor MP. So Mornington, Nepean, South Gippsland, East Gippsland is my strong focus, and it definitely doesn't have the sort of cultural diversity that some other places have. But there's, as I said before, there's a variety of political issues that everyone within those communities has to be well aware of and engaged on.
Yeah. We'll move on now to our fourth question for you.
Who would you say is your political role model and idol?
It's difficult for me to talk about a role model and idol. My grandfather played a big part. He was Tom also, very big on social justice, and my great uncle was arrested at Eureka. The mythology, the story, the values of Eureka, of standing up, of fighting for what you believe in, is something that's very much passed on through my family, a family that's strongly connected to the Irish story, fighting oppression and injustice. So I think that's where, for me, particularly with the work that unions do, the work that the Labor movement, the industrial and political wing do together about fighting for equality of outcomes being set in that sort of the equitable foundation of whether that's early education, primary school, high school, going into the workforce, being paid well, affordable housing, getting access to good quality healthcare, and then that infrastructure, and doing it all within a sustainable climate. Like all those things I know it's a very broad answer to sort of the role model, but it's that there are all the sort of things that I think my granddad believed in, and that sort of value set sits within what many generations fought for through my family and further back. So yeah.
And I think I can kind of relate to that as well, because I'm also of Irish descent on my father's side.
Yeah.
So my great grandfather came here during the gold rush.
Yep.
So and his son and my grandfather as well, they were all involved in the labour movement.
Yeah.
Especially around that, because we're originally from Mount Edgerton, so around that Ballarat
Yeah.
region. So my great grandfather was heavily involved in the Labour Party, and he knew the former Premier of Victoria at the time, Edmund Hogan, who was a Labour MP.
Yeah.
And my grandfather as well was very involved in the Labour Party, so he knew former opposition leader Arthur Corwell, people like Tom McIntosh, even John Cain Senior to an extent. So there is a little bit of I guess with the Irish Catholics, is a bit of a connection towards the Labour Party in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's different issues, different times, but that sort of value set and that, I suppose, willingness to fight for the values that you believe in is very much underpinning. So yeah.
We'll move on now to our next question for you, Tom. Tobias.
What made you run in the 2022 state election for the Labour Party, and what made you join the Labour Party?
Labour Party, yeah. So look, it was I think the opportunity to run. I previously, so I actually came in before the 2022 election just by a few months when Jane Garrett passed away, and having worked for her in the past, the opportunity came for me to replace her in the upper house, and it was one that I absolutely was willing to take. So.
Was it and what made you specifically join the Labour Party in general as well?
Oh, the Labour Party comes back to all the values I spoke to earlier. It's it's all that equitable outcome stuff, and one of the things I haven't really touched on enough yet too is climate change, because without acting on climate change, we cannot set the foundations for an equal society if we are entering into food scarcity, if our most vulnerable are struggling with their living conditions, water supply, these sorts of things, whether it's premiums going up on people's property for insurance, like we need to deal with this. I've actually just come out of the chamber in a debate on this. It's something I'm very passionate about. If we don't have those foundations right, and for something that impacts every single generation to follow us, but is impacting our generation, and the likes of yourselves will be here till the end of the century. I don't like talking about next century or like even 20 years away, because it's right here, it's right now.
Yeah.
And I get incredibly frustrated with members of parliament or political parties who want to use climate change or energy policy, as energy is a key component of dealing with climate change. It's sort of the big first chunk we need to deal with, who treat it like a political football rather than something that is absolutely essential to humans, here and around the world.
Yeah, and I think in general as well, as you said, this is an issue that is especially important for me and Tobias as well coming into the future, because this will be our planet. We'll be the politicians, people our age will be the politicians in 20, 30 years time, and the decisions that are made currently right now will reflect how the world is for us when we have our own family. So it is really, really important that people like you, Tom, are fighting for climate change and fighting for more recognition, especially against other parties in Parliament. I think in general, a lot of young people our age are very, very as I would put it, they're very climatized and they know a lot about climate change. But I think in general, it is important that you keep that rhetoric up and you keep pushing it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the decisions we make in this next decade, like the decade to here and the next decade, like that basically makes it or break it, because we don't have time. Like our goals in Victoria are net zero by 2045. So we need to deal with energy, and our goal is by 2035 to have 95% of our emissions to be from renewable sources. To deal with transport, deal with agriculture, all these emissions. So, but it's this work in this decade that I passionately believe sets us up to achieve. And there'll be technological advances which will make things easier. But even just coming out of the chamber, having the opposition saying that it's not working because we're just bringing our goals forward from 2050 to 2045 for net zero emissions. That's something we're passing in legislation right now today. It's being debated in the chamber, and we're being told, we can't do it and this and that. We are beating our goals. We have 40% of energy in this state is from renewable sources. We have 42.7% reduction from our peak emissions in 2010. That's what we are down. So we are doing it, and we're increasing our targets. We're bringing our targets forward because we're beating our current goals. So I think we should be proud of what we're achieving. We're a leading jurisdiction, but we should be absolutely pushing to do, our targets are our floors, not our ceilings, and we should be looking to bust through those floors, which is exactly what's being debated in the Parliament today. And without being too political, I think it's quite shameful for those who stand opposite with no solutions, no ideas, and just say you can't do that, and just try and muddy the waters, which unfortunately has occurred a lot in the last 20 years, rather than just getting on. And it should be a point of political agreement. Let's agree on the problem. Let's debate, to somewhat the solutions, but let's get on with it. If you just say no, that's not bringing solutions to the floor to be debated that the community and the Parliament can debate. Just saying no and muddying water doesn't get us anywhere. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and I think in general as well, another thing we have to remember is, a lot of those, especially those communities that you represent in the, those former coal mining areas, the Latrobe Valley. I think it's important as well that we remember that, we have to, there's a lot of those people that work in those sort of coal mining industries, and, some of them, are a bit scared that, the movement towards renewables, could make them lose their jobs. So I think it's important that the government also shows that, in general, that they are there to support them and they'll have employment afterwards, and in the renewable sector towards the future.
Yeah, and one of the learnings I took away from Jed was we talked a lot about Germany exiting its coal industry in the 70s and 80s, and they transitioned almost every single worker, whether that was an early retirement, reaching retirement age and exiting at that point, or retraining. And something that, when you have a fundamental belief in the TAFE system, and education, training and skills, that the basically 2 decades, given the majority of the time we've been in government since the turn of the century, when TAFE was on its knees, that we've built it back up and given it the ability. And then when we've got an offshore wind industry that's looking at $40 to $60 billion of investment off our coastline and requiring tens of thousands of workers, that's why we're investing in the TAFEs with our clean energy packages and programs, as we talked before about electricians, the plumbers and the gas fittings, whether it's like changing houses over to electric and this. There is so much work coming, and we're absolutely committed to ensuring that those in the coal industry, which is shutting down, they're privately owned. They're not looking to extend their life. They're not looking to build, even if we stood back, no one's going to want to build a coal plant. So we've got to acknowledge the problem, show the solutions, and get on and deliver all that. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I think in general that it is really important, as you said, that, as you did say, they're privately owned. So, and when you look across the world, everyone is moving away from coal and everyone is moving away from that. So it's important that, as you said, we continue to move into offshore wind, solar panels, even hydroelectricity to an extent, which are very, very renewable options in terms of energy.
Yeah, and have the debate, but have it meaningfully. And we see that, and not to be too political again, but the coalition talking about nuclear at the moment, they had 10 years in federal government and they didn't research or investigate nuclear. They had 16, 18, 20, whatever it was, energy policies come through in that time, but nothing meaningful. So they weren't investing in coal, they weren't researching nuclear, because that's going to take years and years and years just to set the regulatory framework in what's the most expensive energy, generation, with waste that currently looks at tens of thousands of years of storage, and it's socially not very popular. So to flag things that you don't meaningfully want to try and deliver is, you've got to bring solutions that can come to the table that can be implemented. They don't have to be implemented right away, but there's got to be some sort of realistic time frame to get things up. Otherwise, you're just wasting time and money.
Yeah, and and time is very valuable in this sense.
Yes.
Because as you said, we're trying to put the targets now down to 2035, so that's only just over 10 years' time. So
Yeah.
time is very valuable, and we don't have much time in terms of saving the planet and combating the effects of climate change.
Absolutely.
So we'll move on to our final question. So finally, what's one piece of advice you'd give to students in 2024?
There goes the bell. I'm going to have to run for a break. One piece of advice: get active, get involved. If you're passionate, find a way to lean in. I was passionate but never quite found that, particularly coming from Ballarat and the regions, never quite found that path. But knock on doors, do some work experience, reach out, get involved, get active. It may not be the thing you want to do for all your life, but get active and get involved, and in time a door will open. That's what's happened for me. Doors have opened, I've walked through them. Just keep fronting up, knocking on the door, doors will open, walk through them, and you'll never know where you find yourself. Thank you. Yep.